Hey, what's up, guys? Hardleg here with another Yu-Gi-Oh! Vlog style thing. I'm here with Captain Cardsworth today.
Hello.
Hello. You guys may have noticed that there's no What a Deck today. I'm sorry about that, and you're getting this instead. I hope you enjoy it.
I know I sure don't.
Yeah. Basically, the reason there's no What a Deck this week is because I had problems testing. They uploaded Yugi Pro with or YGO Pro with the new ban list and everything. And the server that I normally play on wasn't available. So I had to test on unrated stuff. It took twice as long. Like, I have a deck ready, but I don't think it's good enough yet. So, well, plus we've got the new ban list coming out, what, the 9th?
I believe so, yes.
Yeah, so it's like a week away from the ban list anyway, so it's still kind of up in the air. So I thought instead of doing a What a Deck, I'm going to do something a little bit different. I'm going to make a little sort of prediction slash guide slash, I guess, vlog. But yeah, I just thought, 2016 is going to be here in a few months. We just got the new ban list that made all the old meta pretty much dead, for the most part, or at least significantly less useful than it was. We've got, what was it, Orders of Chaos?
Dimension of Chaos.
Dimensions of Chaos, and that's coming out November 6th. So that'll be like 2 or 3 days from when this comes out. And then we've got Breakers of Shadow that's coming out, I think, January?
January 15th.
Yeah, January 15th. So 2016 is really going to be a whole new set of meta. We're going to get all these new cards that are a lot of these new archetypes that are going to change things up, or support for archetypes that'll change things up. The old archetypes are dead, and with it a lot of the meta is changing. So since on What a Deck I normally do rogue, anti-meta, troll decks, I go against the meta. I try to make decks that don't get hit by the ban list, or don't, like, major parts of them don't get hit.
Yeah, no, 3 mathematicians.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so I thought I'd go over, we're going to talk about some of the new decks that are coming out. We're going to be talking about some of the anti-meta cards that you can use against them, maybe some of the decks that might see a resurgence. It's just going to be a vlog style thing. And next week we will have another What a Deck. I've already got it planned. I've already got sleeves made. I just need to test it more, get a couple kinks worked out, and we'll have that up next week for you. So I hope you guys don't mind. In addition, because there's no What a Deck this week, and I know most of you aren't on the Patreon, but the Patreon, the $1 tier, the lowest tier you get free all the sleeves. And since there are no sleeves this week, what I'm going to do is we're having a little trivia contest. Just one question on the Hardleg Facebook. Facebook.com/HardlegGaming, I'm pretty sure. There'll be a link on the screen, and also in the description. No annotations, just descriptions and screen. But if you go there, there'll be a question. First person to answer the question correctly can tell me any archetype or any card. I'll make sleeves based around that. And everyone will get them this week, not just the Patreon people. So there'll be some extra bonus sleeves for you guys on the Facebook. So that's extra there. But without further ado, let's go ahead and dive right into this meta. So this is the 2016 archetypes that we think are going to be good. Obviously, we've still got a few more months left of 2015, but we're most likely going to get another ban list either in January or February, something along that lines. And then we'll probably see somewhat the same cards available all the way through the summer, up until the World Tournament again. They might do another, like, summer ban list to hit a couple things, but most of the time it's once they set things up in the winter. So these are the things that are going to be to look forward to for the rest of the year, once we get the next 2 sets and everything. We picked 10 decks, mostly because we have a grid that we're going to be using later on, and it had 10 slots in it. So we picked 10 decks, pretty much in order of what we think they're going to be good at. So first we've got the PP deck, the Performapals Perform Ages. A lot of people call this the Pepe or PEPE. It's based off some acronym. I don't care, I call it the PP deck. PP poo poo, I'm hilarious. Fuck this deck. It's actually not too bad, but it's what's doing really the best in the OCG. In OCG land, this is like
Tier 0.
Tier 0, no one else can stop it. Next we've got Cosmos, the TCG archetype. Of course, they are attack in the battle step, summon all the things, especially with the new Dimension of Chaos stuff. I'm sure everyone who doesn't play them are annoyed by them. I know I am. Of course, we've got the new Monarch support, which should be coming out. I think the structure deck's coming out sometime this winter.
We're getting a structure deck?
Yeah, there's with all the new Monarch support, that the Heaven Monarch and the Darkness Monarch.
Interesting.
They draw for days. I'm sure you guys are familiar with it. I faced it a couple times on the What a Deck. Arch Nemesis number 2, Psy-Frames. I mean, if you're not familiar with them, get out. What are you doing here? You don't need to know about the anti-meta if you don't know what Psy-Frames are. Got Magispectors, the new Pendulum Negate All the Things archetype. Infernoids, Arch Nemesis number 1. They've been good for a while, but of course now that everything top tier has been knocked down a peg, I think they have a chance to shine. Cyber Dragon Infinity Turbo. I'm not sure if this is probably the closest thing to not actually being a deck. I've seen a lot of decks that just make Cyber Dragon Infinity. He's enough of a hassle that I think he counts almost as a deck archetype by himself, especially if we keep Ptolemaeus in the TCG. If they limit him in America, then he may not be as much of a problem. But right now, there's a lot of people who want to get over Cyber Dragon. Kleehorps. Kleehorps, of course, like, meta already. They got towers taken away, so they're not unstoppable. But they still have Skybase. You could still tribute them. You could still summon a whole bunch of monsters. You could still play all the really good floodgates, and they're not really bothered by them because they can normal summon. They don't need their effects. Everything. So I think Klees still stand a pretty good chance once people change their strategy with them. We threw Speedroids on here. That's sort of our token. Like, this is probably a tier 2 deck, but we're gonna throw it on here because they're new and interesting and. We think they've got some potential. We have to put a synchro deck on here other than Psy-Frames because, what's that saying? Fuck Psy-Frames.
Yes, yeah. Indeed. Get that on the screen, Joe.
Yeah. And then finally, Counter Fairies, which may just be hype, but at the time of recording this, I've seen quite a few videos of Counter Fairies going plus 10 and starting off the first turn with, like 4 counter traps, 4, like, Great Horn of Heaven or whatever. A lot of people are saying once that set, because that set that has the Counter Fairy isn't out in Japan yet, that comes out for them soon. And they're saying once that comes out, it's going to be tier 0, like the only thing that will be able to stand up to it is it. Okay, so there's the 10 decks that we think are most likely going to be the top tier decks of 2016. And then now we've got some cards that we've sat down, we've amassed up, we've looked at what we think is going to be able to stop those, or what has the best chance of stopping those. And we're just going to go through those real quick. These are going to be... Look for these in the What-A decks of the next, like, 6-7 months, because a lot of these are going to be making appearances. If you play anti-meta, if you play rogue, here's the stuff to invest in right now. Because these are going to be super useful if you want to fuck over your friends with their super expensive decks. So first up on the list, Ojama Trio. This has always been one of those underrated, like, sort of meta cards, especially now that there's more swarm-based. A lot of people are like, oh, you put them and they're kind of useless and they can do 300 damage when you attack them or whatever. But there's a lot of, especially with the Performapal Perform Mages, like, their whole thing is that they swarm with level 4 monsters, and they make a whole bunch of, like, rank 4s. They make a whole bunch of big things. And if you fill up 3 of their monster card zones, they're pretty limited with what they can do. Especially now that Exiton's gone, they can't just Exiton and then continue from there. If you leave the Ojama Trio, that's really good for stalling, as, like, you know, you set up and then they can't explode all over you and make a giant mess of things. That sounded terrible. But yeah, with Ojama Trio there, you clog up their zones, they can't do that much, and then you have a chance to make a comeback before they can barf everything out onto the field. Likewise with Klees, not quite as hurt, because they can do with just one good Kleehort monster. They have that equip spell that can give them a little bit of an attack and let them search and stuff like that. And of course they can still tribute 2 of their Kleehorps if they have 2 on the field. So they still have a bit of a chance, but it does slow them down. They can't make Towers is banned. They can't make Skybase because they need to tribute 3. They, of course, Psy-Frames can't do anything if you put a monster on their side of the field. All their effects, they have to have one. And this is such a, like, not very trap-heavy format that I can see the Psy-Frame that negates traps probably won't be seeing as much play. So your chances of getting Ojama Trio off are a little bit better. And once you do, they're pretty much like they're dead in the water. You keep those there until you can get out whatever you want. Because, I mean, they can sync with the Ojama tokens, but all their tuners are the Psyframe cards. They can't be normal summoned or set. So they're not going to be able to do that very quickly. And then there's also, in that same vein, Putrid Pudding Buddy Bodies. A weird little card, especially if you're playing a Pendulum deck, because it's destroy one Pendulum card you control, give control of this card to your opponent. It can't be used for anything. It's useless. It's like an Ojama token, except it inflicts 300 every turn. So that's another neat little one. Of course, against Psyframes, you're going to have to be able to play a spell first, and a monster, and then activate the effect. So it may be a little more difficult to get off. And of course it's just the one, but it still is a nice little utility card, especially if you're doing a burn lockdown deck that has pendulums in it. Of course, if you're playing against a pendulum deck, they can always destroy one of their pendulums to send it back over to you. So, yeah, enjoy that trade-off. And then Daniel wanted to mention Dustons.
What about them?
You wanted to mention them.
And you just mentioned them.
Okay, Dustons. Apparently they're on the level of Ojama Trio somehow?
Do you not remember our What a deck?
A little bit.
You use House Duston, you ram it into something your opponent controls, then you summon out 4 of the colored Dustons that can't be used for anything, and it fills up their field.
Oh, okay. So yeah, there you go. And if you could do 4 of those, that works with like Cyber Dragon and stuff too, because then they can't make Infinity with only one open card zone. Actually, that shuts down most of these. Good job. Dustons.
Dustons, anti-meta, 10 out of 10.
Yeah, Dustons may actually be a good anti-meta deck coming up here. We'll see. We may have to revisit the Duston deck. So next we got the very important Imperial Iron Wall. Stops all things from being banished. Doesn't do much against the Perform Mages. Cosmos shuts down completely. Or not completely, but most of their effects they need to banish in order to do. If you want something to counter Cosmos, this is the card. Likewise, Psyframes have that spell card they need to banish. Granted, and then all their like they can still synchro, but all their synchros banish themselves. Like that's their effect. They can't keep your hand down. They can't get rid of your field. As long as you have this on the field, they're going to be tricky. And again, it's a trap card. So unless they're playing the stuff that negates traps, they're gonna have a bad time. Likewise, Infernoids. If you want, that's your anti-Infernoid card. Side deck Iron Wall. Now, so Imperial Iron Wall right now about $2 to $5. So if you're playing real life, pick those up now. That'd be a good thing because if Cosmos take off, if they really become the top tier deck that I think they're going to be, this is going to be the anti-meta. This is going to be the answer to Cosmos. As close of an answer as you can get. And like I said, they also slow down Psyframes. They shut down Infernoids completely. And the new Monarch cards, like, they kind of have to banish some stuff. You're gonna slow them down. It's not gonna completely shut them down. But if you have a format of Monarchs and Cosmos, Imperial Iron Wall is going to be cancer to them. Likewise, there's another card not very often known, Chaos Hunter. So when your opponent special summons a monster, discard 1 card, special summon this card from your hand. Your opponent cannot remove cards from play, and it's got 2,500. I used this for a while as an anti-Dark Law card, because it's just got 100 more, and it's fuck your effect, Dark Law. And like I said, against stuff like Cosmos, like it can get over Slip Strider and stuff like that if they summon out that. Of course, they have to special summon first, and you have to discard a card, so it's kind of a hefty cost. But if you really just want to stop things from being banished, maybe against Infernoids, because Infernoids will special summon. They have to special summon everything. So they put out a little 1,600 Dinker, and then you're like, oh, no more special summons for you. So this is a pretty good card. So next we got my personal favorite, Fossil Dyna / the Barrier Statues / Jaugen. Anything that shuts down special summons. These have always been kind of decent, but especially in this format, because you're getting a lot more of cards that can't be played unless they're special summoned. Like, Cosmos really can't do anything unless they can special... I mean, they can still tribute, but it's going to be a lot more difficult. They don't have a lot of removal. And I actually saw, like, there was an OCG deck profile not too long ago that was very similar to my asshole deck. That was pretty much just, like, Fossil Dyna, Barrier Statues with Trap Hole and Mirror Force. Where, like, force you to normal summon and attack, and then just stop your normal summons and attacks. So, if there's an anti-meta, I remember back during Insectors, there was sort of like this Malefic Skill Drain Necro Valley deck that everyone seemed to have come together with at the same time that was like the anti-meta deck. So if there is the anti-meta deck that's just a hodgepodge, it'll probably be some Fossil Diner Barrier Statue bullshit. Which I personally love. So, and of course that'll shut down your Performa Pals. Psyframes can't do anything. They weep. Infernoids cannot do anything. Cyber Dragon not going to be able to, like, even Cyber Dragon himself is a special summon monster. Speedroids, even Counter Fairies, if you can go first and get that out, they're going to have a difficult time getting around that. Of course, Cosmos and Monarch, I mean, they still have, Monarchs can still normal summon. They're a tribute deck. They don't need to special summon, and they can use, like, Stormforth and stuff to get around you. But you're still going to slow them down a little bit because they need to get Ether or whatever the little ones are that they special summon. And Cosmos just has some high attack, normal summonable monsters to begin with. I mean, Farm Girl can get over all of those. So it's still going to be a little bit of a trouble, but you're still, I think your best bet with the coming up meta is to, if you want to play anti-meta, there's some kind of Fossil Dyna shut down special summons deck. So next on the list is Wavering Eyes. I don't know, I don't think I really need to mention Wavering Eyes almost. I mean, if you're playing against Pendulums, it's really bad for Pendulums. If you have Pendulums, this is one of those cards, like, even the meta decks are probably going to be playing Wavering Eyes, because it's such a good, like, good for you counter opponent thing. And especially, one of the meanest things, if you're unfamiliar with Wavering Eyes, it destroys all cards in the Pendulum Zone, and then you get an effect based on how many cards it was that were destroyed. If there's just one, you inflict 500 damage, which I don't know why they even put that there. This is useless. Wonder if anyone's ever Wavering Eyes for game. Whatever. Number 2, if 2 are destroyed, you get to add a Pendulum from your deck to your hand, so it's a good search card. If there's 3, you can banish 1 card on the field. If there's 4, you get to add another Wavering Eyes from your deck to your hand. So, you have your full Pendulum Scales, your opponent has their full Pendulum Scales, you're going to be banishing, searching at least 2 things, and also 500. Don't forget that 500. So one mean trick to do is to just set Wavering Eyes and wait for your opponent to activate theirs, and then chain yours. So yours will destroy their monsters first, and then you get the search, and then theirs is just wasted. And they get no effects. But yeah, anything that runs Pendulums, Wavering Eyes is going to be acid too. So, yeah, get yourself a Wavering Eyes, bitch. Likewise, Spell Shattering Arrow, pretty much the same. It's going to destroy all the Pendulum Zones. You don't get to summon, but it saves your Pendulums, and if you don't play Pendulums, it's almost the same thing. Likewise, in addition to being good versus all the Pendulum decks, it also helps shut down Psyframes, because they're nothing without their field spell. Depending on what kind of Monarchs they're running, they may have a lot of not a lot of field spells. You can only have 1 field spell. They may have the field spell, the one that keeps you out of the extra deck that everyone hates. They may have that. They may have a bunch of continuous spells that stop their tribute summoned monsters from being destroyed. Spell Shattering Arrow will stop that. Likewise, Infernoids. A lot of people run all monster Infernoids. Spell Shattering Arrow is not going to help. If they run the Void Infernoids with the field spell and stuff, then Spell Shattering Arrow will help. I feel like that kind of goes without... If they run face-up spells, then the card that destroys face-up spells will stop them.
So Mystical Space Typhoon, anti-meta, 10 out of 10.
Not good enough. Well, since you brought up Mystical Space Typhoon, too slow, only gets rid of 1 card. You really need to, like, Mass Destruction. There's a couple other ones that I know are going around. There's, of course, Typhoon, which is MST, except for it's a trap, but you can activate it from your hand if your opponent has pendulums. So there's that. You can do it first turn to disrupt scales. Pretty neat. There's also Pendulum Storm. Destroy as many cards in each player's pendulum zones as possible, then destroy one spell trap your opponent controls. So that's Wavering Eyes, but not as good. But a lot of people are like, it destroys more spell traps if you have a high spell trap deck, which, like Magispectors, that might work better against them. Also, if you don't play Pendulums, obviously this might be a little better than Wavering Eyes because you're not going to have 4. There's also Twin Twister, which is discard 1 card, destroy 2 spell traps on the field. That's basically double MST that you have to discard a card for. But it's quick play, and obviously if you need stuff in the graveyard for whatever reason, well, there you go. So there's a lot of better options than MST. I think MST's finally sort of getting phased out as the best kind of spell trap stuff. And of course, there's always a chance that Harpy's Feather Duster will get errata to come back. In which case, or we'll get Heavy Storm back or something. I doubt it, but there's a chance. So next we've got, not really one card, but more the Defissure and Macrocosmos, the 2 Banish All the Things cards, along with Dark Law, who also banishes most of the things. These are not quite as good as they were last format. Last format we saw a whole bunch of floaters and things that activated in the graveyard, like Shaddoll's and Burning Abyss. Yangzings. Now, not so much, but they still have a little bit of utility, just because cards that, like Pendulum Monsters that are destroyed, while one of these cards are out, will be banished instead of going to the extra deck. So it won't shut them down completely, but it will prevent them from being able to recycle things. So the Performa Pals, the Magispectors to a somewhat of a degree, the Kleehorps, those are all going to be affected by mass banish spells. Likewise, Monarchs are not going to be able to do as much of their shenanigans with the drawing and banishing and redrawing of cards. They're not going to be able to reuse as much of their stuff and send things to the graveyard. So that'll slow them down significantly. Infernoids, of course, without the graveyard, they can't do... If you're playing Infernoids and you don't run something that destroys spell traps and your opponent's like, oh, activate Macrocosmos, you might as well just surrender. There's nothing you can do. And Speedroids, of course, not going to do that great. They don't need the graveyard, but they use it enough that it's really going to hamper their ability to do stuff. They're going to be able to do one really good play where they summon from the deck, and then they're not going to be able to recycle anything. Then everything's gone. And they just have to hope that whatever they summoned can do a good job. So next we're getting kind of this very specific cards that really only hurt a couple of the decks, but man, do they hurt them. Talking about Mask of Restrict and I guess to a lesser degree Fog King. Cards cannot be tributed. If you want to stop Magispectors and you want to stop them hard, Mask of Restrict is the way to do it. They have to tribute their cards to do anything. If they can't tribute, they're gone, and they can't even respond to it by tributing something, because it's a continuous trap. Likewise, Monarchs, they're the tribute artifact. They could still do some stuff, but they're not going to be nearly as useful with Mask of Restrict or Fog King out on the field. Likewise, the new Kleehorps, with the way they're setting up, they're going to be relying on those tribute effects. They're going to be wanting to get Skybase, and not being able to tribute is going to hamper them just a bit. Just a tiny bit. And to a lesser extent, Infernoids can dodge effects by tributing themselves to banish something from your graveyard. So shutting that down should slow them down a little bit. But yeah, especially because Magispectors are coming out in the neck. We're not getting a lot of this Performapal nonsense. So if you're going to be going against a bunch of Magispectors who are just going to try to negate everything, Mask of Restrict. So then, of course, Anti-Spell Fragrance. Troll card supreme for years and years. Daniel's clapping just ever so slightly. After being quiet for 2 hours straight.
I'm listening. You're doing good.
Oh, okay. So yeah, Anti-Spell Fragrance. If you're unfamiliar with it, it basically says spell traps have to be set, and they can't be activated the same turn they're set. They basically become like traps. You have to set them and wait a turn. And this has always been sort of like a slow down the game kind of deck, but particularly against pendulums, because you cannot set pendulum monsters in the pendulum zones. So if you play anti-spell fragrance, your opponent cannot activate pendulum monsters. So Performapals, Counter Fairies, Magispectors, Kleehorps, all gone with a burp. And of course, Psyframes, you're going to keep their field spell down for return. That gives you a little bit extra time. Monarchs, they're shuffling through all their cards. They're going to have to set those. They can't activate the ones they search for. So they're going to slow them down. Likewise, Spell Canceller, that just says spell cards can't be activated. Of course, kind of tricky to get out. He's a level 5 insect, but I think he's a level 5 insect.
He's a machine.
He's a level 5 machine. Sorry, he looks kind of like an insect. He's a little difficult to get out. There's not very many ways to search him, but if you can get him out, your opponent's going to have a bad time.
Because he also negates the face-up cards that are already face-up when you bring him out.
Yeah. Of course, the same thing with Naturia Beast. He's going to negate all the spell cards and everything as well. So the only problem with Spell Canceller and Naturia Beast is, obviously, because they're monsters, they can be destroyed by battle. They can be destroyed a lot easier with monster effects. They can be sent back to the hand. There's a lot of stuff you can do without spells to get rid of them, whereas most of the stuff that destroys anti-spell fragrance is going to be spells. If they have like a Wavering Eyes or Spell-Shattering Arrow or something, or an MST, Galaxy Cyclone, none of that can be used to get rid of anti-spell fragrance. So that's going to be a really hard card. I'm probably going to make more anti-spell fragrance decks here in the future, definitely. So next up we have the anti-search cards, Mistake, and to a lesser degree Droll Lockbird. Again, because Droll Lockbird's a monster, there's more ways to negate it, and it only stops that one turn. And it really only stops people from adding a whole bunch of cards. They can still add one, but they can't. If you want to stop Counter Fairies, and you want to stop them quick, Droll Lockbird is probably going to be one of your best bets, because, they get one counter trap, but they're not going to be able to add the other 4. They're not going to be able to add all their pendulums. They're only going to get one card, and but of course, and then you have to be able to do something to prevent them, because otherwise you're going to die. Mistake, if you can go first, a lot better. And obviously it stays on the field, so if they can't get rid of it immediately, they're not going to be able to do anything. Performapals need to search as well. Monarchs, dear God, they're just nothing but using cards to get other cards to add cards. Magispectors, Jesus. Like, Mistake is just, that is the one. Mask of Restrict is good, but Mistake is going to stop them from getting any of those, their cards. If they can't search, they're just a bunch of weak little, monsters that are coming out and doing nothing. So, they're going to have a bad time. Of course, you got to be able to attack, you got to be able to kill them quickly. You need some stuff. Because otherwise, they're just going to make a defense wall until they draw into the things they need. But that'll definitely stop them. Cleese. This would have been bad against Cleese if Scout hadn't been hit to 3. They still have to search a little bit, but they're not as reliant on searching as they once were, so they might actually have a leg up in this department. If anything, Cleese might be able to run Mistake without too much of a problem if they can complete their scales with other things. Well, plus, 1 second. Okay, so Mistake only stops you from searching. It doesn't stop you from drawing. So if you have your Kleehorp Monolith, you can still draw off of all your tributes. So if you want to make a Kleehorp deck that just has all the floodgates in it, you can go ahead and do that. Which leads us to our last anti-meta card, Lose 1 Turn / Skill Drain. But Lose 1 Turn, like Fossil Dyna, is pretty much going to shut down or slow down everything except for Cleese. Cleese can still get around that. Cleese, now that I'm looking at this list, Cleese are almost shaping up to be a kind of anti-meta deck. If it weren't for the fact that everyone would be playing Wavering Eyes and Spell-Shattering Arrow to get rid of all the pendulum scales, they might be really, really awesome. I might have to make an anti-meta Clee deck. It might be happening, people, pretty soon. But yeah, everything else, I mean, Cosmos, they can kind of deal with it, but you're going to slow them down considerably. Monarchs, they're not going to be able to summon things from the deck with the Monarch of Heaven. Magispectors, when they pendulum summon, they're not going to be able to search. Infernoids aren't going to be able to do any of their trigger effects. They'll still have big, really attack point monsters, but they're not going to be able to search. Yeah, so those are the big cards that we think are going to be good in the upcoming meta. Obviously, we left out, there's a couple things that, like we tried to stay away from stuff that's already limited or semi-limited, like Torrential Tribute, for example. Like, Torrential Tribute's going to be really good in this upcoming format, because a lot of people pendulums, a lot of people summon, a lot of decks will summon masses amount of things, and stuff like Cosmos, like, it doesn't matter if they tag out, their monster's still getting destroyed by Torrential Tribute. That's one of those things that distinguishes it from last meta, because last meta, if you Torrential Tributed a Burning Abyss deck, they're just going to get all their effects. Shaddoll players are just going to get all their effects.
Yang Zings are just going to get all their effects.
Yeah, they're going to get all their monsters. There was no point in Torrential Tribute, there's no point in Mirror Force or Dark Hole last format, but this format, things are more destroyable. They're much more easily destructible. So you're going to see those things come back. We didn't want to mention them here because most of them are at like 1 or 2. There's no real point in just being like, yeah, run Torrential Tribute. A lot of you probably already were. It's a really good card. Likewise, we want to end off with, there's a couple decks, obviously, that are going to be doing a little bit better. Well, first of all, I just want to say, Gradles, not looking too good in this next format, unless they can mix with something. And obviously you can throw them in, but where Gradles really excelled was when your opponent makes some big boss monster by using most of their cards. They do a bunch of shenanigans and they make like a Beals, and then you just take their Beals. But this format's a lot less about big, huge boss monsters, and the few boss monsters there are, like the Cyber Infinity Dragon, they're just going to negate that shit. Unless you have like a Dark Hole and a Gradle, which would be really funny. Have them negate the one and then attack them with the Gradle. But yeah, regardless, Gradle's not going to be nearly as good because your opponent's not going to have... They're not going to put all their resources into one card. They're going to have swarms of monsters. This deck is all about swarms of monsters. And when they do have a really big monster, the Gradles are not going to be able to do anything to it. Likewise, Psyframes, they're just going to banish their shit before you can take it. Like, they're not going to be able to... I summon a Synchro. Like, no, your Gradle's not going to be able to do it. Kaijus, on the other hand, because the effects, because they tribute themselves, which doesn't start a chain, which isn't an effect that can be, like, negated, really, because it's just a summoning condition, those are going to be really good in the anti-meta, and you can splash them into a lot of things. Because no matter what, if they do make a big boss monster that you need to get around, like, yeah, maybe you have to give them a monster with 3,000 attack, but that's better than Cyber Infinity Dragon. It's better than having, like, a Beals on board. It's better than having the Draco Slayer, whatever the fuck it is, to just give them this monster and be like, well, there you go. Because there's... unless they have Mask of Restrictor Fog King, they're not going to be able to stop that. So Kaijus are pretty good. I already went over the Fossil Dyna Barrier Statue deck. And then, Evil Swarms. Ophion, being able to stop monsters that are level 5 from being summoned. A lot of these like special summonable monsters are higher in rank. Like Cosmo obviously needs to summon out their higher level monsters. Their lower level monsters cannot get over Ophion. The Performapals have a lot of higher level ones to make their big Ixie monsters. Monarchs, Psyframes, all of these decks that don't use... that rely on high level monsters. Cyber Dragon Infinity even. So the make Ophion set 5 may make a comeback. It still might be a little too slow, it might be a little too difficult to get around them, but if you can, you're going to be shutting down a lot of things. And then finally I want to talk about just a couple other like loose ends. First of all, Royal Decree. I think I already said that most of the decks on the list, most of the new meta stuff is stuff that doesn't run any traps, or runs very few traps. Royal Decree is not going to be too useful, except for counter fairies. If you really want to be an anti-counter fairy deck, Royal Decree is a way to go. You can go first and set that up and be like, go ahead, summon all your counter traps you want, I don't care. Otherwise, probably not going to see too much play, but might be worth side decking. There's also Solemn Notice and Great Horn of Heaven. These are obviously anti-everything. These are easily going to be staples if they don't become limited or forbidden fairly shortly after their release. I don't know. Unless the game just becomes about, like, I will summon all the things, but I negate, and everyone just has a negation, so then it kind of slows down because you don't want to barf everything because everyone has 3 Solemn Notice and 3 Great Horn of Heaven. But we didn't feel like putting those in there because those aren't anti-meta cards, those are anti-everything cards. Every deck on here would probably play those. Especially Magispectors, because they already negate all the things. And finally, we have Vector Pendulum, the Draco Ruler. Nice little generic pendulum monster, scale 3, 1850 attack, not bad, not bad. And his pendulum effect, negate the effects of all cards in your opponent's pendulum zones. Yeah, very, very useful. And it only affects your opponent's pendulum, so, I mean, if you want to just play that shit on whatever, I mean, 3 is a pretty low scale, too. You could still get your level 4 stuff. So you're going to be having a pretty good time with this guy. Again, we didn't put him on here because he seems like he would be a staple. Any deck that runs Wavering Eyes can also run 1 copy of this guy. So you can blow up your opponent's pendulum scales, search out your Vector, put him in there, your opponent can't use any of their effects, yada yada, there you go. So that's some stuff to look out for. And I think that about wraps it up, guys. That's what to look forward to in the next 6 months to a year with Yu-Gi-Oh! We got the big decks coming out. The meta's changing up. Like I said, a lot of this floater stuff that we were dealing with before is changing. Pendulums are on their way in. I hear a lot of people say things like the game is ruined or the game is like broken. And honestly, that seems to happen every year, no matter what happens. I mean, it's always good to have perspective and think back to, like, there was a time when Substitute and Mass Driver was a thing, where FTK, like, before there were even synchros, people were making FTK decks.
I have that deck.
Yeah, that were just incredibly cheap. Cyberstein, fucking... So anytime someone thinks the game is broken, it's not broken. It's just changed, and,
It's just like the old days when Facebook would roll out a new interface and everybody would complain and threaten to leave the Facebook. It's the same thing. Anytime the face of Yu-Gi-Oh! Changes with a new archetype or a new format or a new, monster mechanic, everybody threatens to get up and leave the game, and then they, grow up and keep playing.
Yeah. I mean, that's what this is all about. This is just my way of saying, like, if you're worried about the state of Yu-Gi-Oh!, don't. Yu-Gi-Oh! Is not dead, it is not cancerous, it is not superpower creep. It is just changing. I've done this, I don't know how many years now.
42.
No. not that old, youngster. You just gotta sit down, you gotta look at what you're dealing with, and you gotta plot out what is going to be good against what this format. So hopefully this will help you if you're playing anti-meta like me. Once again, there's the contest on the Facebook. If you like us on there, you should be able to comment on that, and we'll get you guys some sleeves. And next week, I promise we will have a What a Deck. My apologies if anyone who's super disappointed. So we'll see you guys next week. Until then, good luck, have fun. That's some loud footsteps up there, I tell you what.
You have Andre the Giant over?
Yeah, probably. Fucker doesn't pay rent. But he's a ghost, and he's like 8 feet tall, so I can't... The ghost of Andre the Giant? He's terrifying. Joe, if you could put that in somewhere, just randomly, that would be awesome.